Everyone, this is Gene. I'm back with another video. I hope everybody is well. It's about almost 5:30 here in New York City, and I just wanted to get a few more thoughts off my chest. I swear, I promise I will be getting back to comic stuff. So, first off is very briefly, it seems like celebrities, those wonderful, wonderful people who know everything about everything and how to solve all the world's problems as they sit in their ivory towers behind their oodles and oodles and oodles and mountains of cash that people gave to them because they are good entertainers. Right, so you have some celebrities such as Brie Larson and Natalie Portman supporting this whole defund the police thing. Here's what I say to that, and here's what I say to them. Okay, you want to support that? All right, give up your police detail. Give up your bodyguards. Give up your money, your status, your privilege due to the fact that you are a celebrity and rich as all hell, and come live with the rest of us and see what it's like if indeed these defund and dismantle suggestions, I guess you could say, or calls to action actually go through. Then you can tell me, Brie and Natalie Portman and all those celebrities who donated money to help free rioters, not protesters who were unjustly arrested by the cops, but to help rioters and looters. Right? So when you're willing to give up everything that separates you from me, or you from the regular average Joe or Jane, then you can tell me about whether or not the police should be defunded. Make yourself as vulnerable as I am, or as any other regular person is, if they indeed go through with this. I mean, Brie Larson did play Captain Marvel, right? And according to Brie herself, in that film, Captain Marvel is a noble warrior hero. So go on, noble warrior hero. Be about that life. Be a noble warrior hero. Hell, maybe you can be the head of the Guardian Angels. Oh, wait, sorry, they already have a head. And more importantly, the Guardian Angels have more guts. And to be, I guess, a bit... I don't know if it's profane, but maybe brash, but I would say that they have more balls, whether they're male or female, than Brie Larson does. Because the people who are part of the Guardian Angels organization, for those who may not know what that is, it basically functions as like a neighborhood watch of sorts, right? They patrol the city unarmed, right? And they encounter criminals, or they report them or whatnot. And they were started in the late 70s, I think 1979, with Curtis Silva, I think his name is. Right, back in the 1970s, 80s, even into a good chunk of the 1990s, New York City was an incredibly dangerous place because crime ran rampant. And there would be people who would be attacked on trains. Right, there was a famous murder case, or shooting. I think it was a shooting or a stabbing, one of those, in the 80s, where gangbangers, held up train cars with their guns, and one guy who was a regular civilian, I think his name was Bernie Getz or something to that effect. I gotta look it up. Right, but he pulled his firearm and he shot the guy, right, who was holding up an entire train car of people, right? So while I did not live in New York City, like by the time I came of age, Giuliani was mayor, and he had cleaned up the city a lot, right? He was the mayor who turned New York City, or rather Times Square, I should say, from this very seedy area to the tourist trap it currently is. It started with him, right? He was the first mayor, at least to my understanding. I've looked into it in a few years, since the 70s at least, who actually cracked down on crime. Mayors prior to that, Ed Koch, David Dinkins, and whatnot, they really couldn't get the crime under control. And it was tearing the city apart in all boroughs, right? Like those old 70s, 80s stereotypes about, certain parts like Brooklyn and the Bronx and all that, right? Those stereotypes come from that era that period, those decades, right, in New York City, where the trains were so bad that like every train car, not just one or two, but every train car and nearly every train that you took was covered in graffiti or scratchity, right? When they etch stuff into the glass. As someone who, up until the coronavirus hit, has been taking the subway regularly for years, while the subway has its issues, right? It's not terribly clean. The homeless population and all that. It's not perfect by any means, but I don't see too many cars anymore with the scratchity and the graffiti and all of that stuff, right? And whatever you think of Giuliani as a politician or a human being, he was the guy who got that transition and that turnaround for the city started. And part of the way that he did that, right, was by tackling crime. That's just the truth. So if you want to go back to the 1970s, 80s, early to mid 1990s New York, you know, the stuff of infamy and legend, right, that people made films out of. Yeah, defund the cops. And I want Brie Larson, Captain Marvel herself, to come and be a noble warrior hero and do what a hero does, which is save lives. But anyway, there's that. That's the first thing I wanted to address. And the second thing is, and this has been on my mind for a while, but I guess with current events, it's probably best just to let it out now. Right, over my several videos about this, I've been very critical, and I think with good reason, with fairness, with the police and police culture. But there is another side to it, especially since we are talking about police and their interactions with African Americans, and that is indeed black culture in the black community as a community. Please understand that everything I'm going to be saying here is referring to blacks as a community, as a collective, as a group. It does not mean that every single black person falls into these criticisms. I want to make that clear. I'm talking about the general trends and whatnot that the black community, which I'm a part of, I was raised in. I am biracial, black on my mother's side, but I was raised with her side of the family in a black neighborhood, black working class neighborhood. So I am culturally a black American woman, just to make that clear. But if anybody wants to try to check me for making these statements, I'm speaking about blacks as a group, as a collective, not individuals. Individuals make their own choices, right? Not every single person's going to fall into what I say. At the same time, I do think we need to be honest about the various trends that sadly are often negative that are found in the black community. Now, with all those disclaimers put out, and there'll probably still be some people who will be mad as hell at me, but you know what? I'm speaking what I see and what I believe to be true. And if you got something to say, let me know in the comments. And even if you're not black, you can have opinions on the black community without being black. Believe it or not. I know, it's shocking. And I would like to hear those too. So let me know down below. Hey, that rhymes. But anyhow, what I need to say is that black people as a community, black Americans as a community, especially those of us who live in the inner city, swearing warning, swearing warning, swearing warning. We need to get our shit together. We so need to get our shit together. Okay? As a group, as a collective, we keep making the same damned mistakes because we keep depending on other people, in particular politicians, right? In this case, liberal politicians, because of a vast majority of African Americans lean and vote Democrat, to the point that when someone doesn't, and this is something I think I pointed out in the video that I made about Alec Baldwin, right? To the point that when a black person doesn't, right, they are demonized by the black community, oftentimes by their own family, and then of course, as we see now, by certain white celebrities such as uh, Alec Baldwin, or recently by Joe Biden, who said during a podcast with Charlemagne the God, I think is the person's name. I don't really follow rap, but Biden was on his podcast, and of course Biden infamously said, well, if you have trouble choosing between me or Trump, then you ain't black. No. Hell no. No white man, and especially no white politician who was against busing in the 70s and is currently being investigated for sexual harassment in the 1990s is going to tell me who and what I am, what race and culture I belong to, just because I won't vote for him. So Biden can go to hell. But anyway, right, now with that off of my chest, feels so much better. But anyway, we keep depending as a group, as a collective, we keep depending on these politicians who don't give a damn about us, who only come to the black neighborhoods or to the black churches or whatever it is when they need votes. We keep depending on them to elevate us. They can't do it. Okay? They cannot elevate the black community. Even if they wanted to, and they don't, they can't do it. You know why? Because, to quote one of my favorite Guns N' Roses songs, Coma, only you can heal your soul. Only you can help you. Only the black community can elevate the black community. We keep looking for other people to come save us, right? When no, we have to work to save ourselves, to elevate ourselves, right? That's the first thing. And what drives me crazy is that black people collectively as a culture, we're so immersed in other cultures, right? But we don't learn the lessons from them. For example, we are so immersed in church culture, in particular Southern church culture, because many blacks in the past, right, 400 years ago, as so many people love to bring out, right, black people were slaves. Black people were owned by the majority of black people, I should say, who were slaves were owned by white Southerners, right? So I understand why the religious roots are in Southern church culture, right? I get that. I'm not a Southerner. I'm a Northerner, but I do have family like Grandpa, may he rest in peace, and whatnot. So there's origins for even my family, even in the South, in North Carolina and all that. Although the vast majority of us, especially of my mother's generation, were city kids and Northerners. But my point in all this is that, yeah, that's where for many of us our religious roots are. Yet we learn nothing from it, right? We learn nothing about elevating ourselves, right? Improving ourselves, right? What's the saying? God helps those who help themselves, but we won't help ourselves in a collective sense, right? Or here's another one, right? We're so immersed in sports culture, right? We love our football, we love our basketball, but all we seem to learn from that are the dark side of sports, right? The party culture, the drug culture, the gun culture, right? And this can go for rap too and whatnot, right? We keep picking up all the bad stuff and we keep emulating that, all the negative stuff. But we don't want to, collectively speaking, emulate all the good stuff like teamwork and being upbuilding and unity, right? And working hard and striving to improve yourself. And then we wonder why and we call foul when the few of us who become big stars, right, don't want to give back to the community. Some stars do, To be fair, some stars do give back to the community, but most don't, right? They leave the hood and they leave it behind for good. And then those of us still here wonder, well, why ain't he elevating me? Because he can't. Because he doesn't want to. You want to elevate yourself? Elevate yourself. Upgrade yourself. We keep looking to other people to save us when we really need to do is save ourselves. And the way that we save ourselves, or at least one of the ways in my opinion, right? Save ourselves, especially because, again, so many, as is pointed out by many people, blacks are like 15% of the population, but, we account for a huge number of the crimes. Well, here's the thing. Many black households, and I hate to say this, but it's true. It was true in my own experience in life. Many black households are broken homes. It's become a cultural norm, a cultural standard if you are black. And again, it doesn't apply to every single solitary person, I want to be clear. But it has become a cultural norm and a cultural standard to come from a broken home. To come from a broken home oftentimes without a father. And even when there is a father, at times he's not a good father. We keep making these mistakes generationally over and over and over again, right? And we keep making, in most cases, these bad decisions, right? Not getting married, not waiting until we get established before we have children, all this other stuff, right? We make these incredibly immature mistakes time and time and time and time again. And then what do? Collectively, again, I'm going to make it clear, collectively, what do? We depend on the state. We live off the state welfare systems. We live on welfare. Where do you think the welfare queen stereotype comes from? Right? A stereotype, what's the saying? That there's always some bit of truth in a stereotype. It exists for a reason. It exists for a reason. I've been to welfare offices. I grew up in a welfare office because even in my own family, even with my own mother, right, there was a lot of that, again, that making those generational mistakes. And in her particular case, she came from a two-parent home and from a large family, but it was very dysfunctional, right? So I want to be clear. It isn't just about having two parents in the home. It's about having a healthy family background, right? So there's all that. And I kept seeing the same type of person in the welfare office when I was a little kid, right? A woman who couldn't be more than 25 at best, with like 3 kids and her belly swollen and around like she's gonna give birth any minute, right? She may have her mama there. Maybe she has an aunt with her for like moral support, but not a man oftentimes. And I want to be clear, not every person on welfare is just trying to, leech the system dry. Some people really do fall on hard times, right? And they need it to help get back on their feet. But it's also a fact, it's also well known that a lot of young African American women do sort of, in a symbolic sense, marry the state because the guy isn't around and she can't get him to, come around. And so she becomes overly dependent on the state, right? The whole point, at least in my understanding, the whole point of social safety net programs is to be temporary, right? Welfare, social security, unemployment, and various others. They're not meant to last a long time. They're not meant to sustain you throughout your life. They're not meant to take care of you in that way. That's not their purpose. That's not the way they were structured or designed. And I would say many of them need to be very much reviewed because they were not made for our current time period, right? For example, SSI, right? That was devised in the 30s, It was not made with the year 2020 in mind, right? That needs to be revisited. A lot of stuff on the books needs to be revisited, but regardless, right? These things were never meant to, again, be a crutch, right? And sadly, so many people, oftentimes in the black community, treat it as just that, as just a crutch. Why do I need to get a job when I'm getting welfare checks and all this other stuff? No, that is not the way. You're supposed to use it so that you don't totally crash, and then you can get a job or whatever it is, right? Go to school, get a job, right? And improve your life. You're not supposed to spend the rest of your life on it. And yet, that is what so many do. Because there's no incentive for us to do any better. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to do better. Right? If we can fix our broken homes, right? If we can fix our broken selves, right? If we can change the culture in our community to be something better, more positive, more upbuilding, show some growth, guess what? The crime rates are going to drop. Now, of course, there will never be 100%, right? It's impossible. You're always going to have some criminals in the country and in the world, and some of them will be black. It isn't about getting everything to zero. It's impossible. But it's about creating positive, sustainable growth, right? We need to start making this transition from unhealthy community habits and trends to healthy and positive community attitudes and trends. We need to start looking at education as the way out instead of the one in a million chance of our son or our daughter being the next great athlete or the next great singer or the next great entertainer. And I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with those professions. Nothing wrong at all, right? But we need to stop pinning our hopes and dreams on sports, especially becoming a big NBA star, for example, as our ticket out. Because for the vast majority of us, it's not our ticket out. We need to start collectively valuing things like education, right? Like strong family bonds, right? We complain so much collectively as a group. We complain so much and say, oh, the white man held us down. Okay, that was true even decades ago, but it ain't true now. It ain't true now. Stop blaming the white man for your own screw-ups. There comes a time, just like in an individual's life, right? Maybe you came from a horrible background. Maybe your parents were awful people. Okay, I get it. I'm not exactly from the greatest stock either. But there comes a point in life where you need to stop blaming your parents for what you do. And in this case, we need to stop blaming the white race for what happened centuries ago. The America, think about it. Anybody who was a slave is dead. Any slaver is dead. The America that said this was okay has long been dead. Does that mean that there are no longer issues in our community or issues with the black community and the white community or racial tensions? No, of course not. There will always be there. There will always be this residual tension. That's just the fact of life. But it does not have to be this way. And I want to be clear, the cops have absolutely no right to abuse anybody. And again, I said, their bully culture needs to be addressed. It does. But our culture needs to be addressed also, right? Ever been in a relationship, right? And the other person demands that you change, that everything is on you, right? But you're like, well, you could stand to, make a few changes. Yourself to make the relationship better, right? If two people work on themselves individually, both acknowledging that, hey, look, I've got some issues, I've got some screw ups and all that, and if you work on yourself, and then the other person works on themselves, when you come back together, there's a good chance it'll be a healthy, happier relationship because you've spent time working on yourself, as opposed to just pointing the finger and going, you're the bad guy, or the bad girl, you're the one who's the reason why this isn't working out. And sometimes that might be right. Maybe it is the other person, but you also got to look at yourself and say, okay, what can I do better? And I think that's what we need to do. And again, collectively, we keep blaming white people for our current day problems. Yet we also expect white politicians to pull our asses out of the fire. That's not the way, right? We get angry with the Asian community because they have so many businesses in our neighborhoods, but we don't think to open businesses ourselves, right? Some do. Some do, to be fair, but you have no idea how much grumbling I heard growing up about why there was a Chinese restaurant instead of a soul food restaurant. It's like, well, why don't you start your own business then? Gumbo? Start your own business. And then guess what? They actually did open some soul food restaurants around here, which quickly went under because everybody kept going to the Chinese restaurant and not going to the soul food restaurant. You can't get mad, right? You can't get mad that for example, a Chinese restaurant exists in a black neighborhood. Say, we want a soul food restaurant. It's our neighborhood. Get the soul food restaurant and then not support it by not going there. And then when it closes, get pissed off. Yes, I have seen this a few times. And sadly, this is what we do. We get mad at everybody. We get mad at everything. We blame everybody else for our problems. It is a learned helplessness. And if we are ever supposed to stand up on our own two feet, we have to tell ourselves, you know what? I'm done being a victim. I'm done complaining about how the white man owned my great grandpappy in North Carolina hundreds of years ago. This ain't the 1860s or the 1760s or anything else. This is the year 2020. If we're supposed to how do I put it? We need to start from here. We need to start now. We need to say this line and no further. So that when people are looking back, when there are blacks looking back, 100, 150, 200 years from now, if the world still exists, you never know, right? But when they're looking back at us, and they're looking back at this period of time, they can say, hey, you know what? The black community was in a really bad way, but this was the year they started turning it around. And look at us now. We have our own businesses, and we're doing better culturally, right? And we're getting education, and we're elevating ourselves, and we're continuing that pattern. We need a winning culture. A winning culture is what will turn it around. It doesn't matter whether it's a family, whether it's a business, whether it's a country, whatever it is. The only way to turn a bad situation around is to create a winning culture. The only way we can help ourselves as a black community is to spend more time working on ourselves individually and collectively than complaining about whether or not Kylie Jenner is engaging in cultural appropriation when she wears dreads, when we are far from the first or only culture to ever have dreads. But anyway, I just wanted to get that rant off my chest. I know I'm gonna probably catch some heat, but what else is new? So anyway, that's the video. I just wanted to get my thoughts out. I'll be back with some geeky stuff to rant about in another video. Anyway, I hope you're all well. Bye.